let's move on to MotoGP and look forward to this weekend by looking back first at the test in Misano, the final in-season test, which saw a lot of, obviously, developments being tested for 2022. It was Rossi's final test. We had Remy Gardner and Ralph Fernandez make their debuts on the big bikes. Pete, can you talk us through a bit about sort of the big standouts that you learned from testing?
Well, the main one was, I guess, the new Honda. The Honda, as we knew, they've been saying this is even before the test, that this was going to be a really, really important one for them. As you were saying, it's the last one during the season. So the next time they get to test with their riders will be at the end of November, and then that's it for the year. So they want to start to get the pieces in place, if you like. So they really, no holds barred. They came out with at least one completely new bike. We don't know. There might even have been a second one, or just some different parts on the prototype, if you like, as they were calling it. But it was almost like a sort of a Yamaha at the front and a Ducati at the back, if you wanted to sort of summarize it. It's very different to what they're using at the moment. Air intake, as I say, looked pretty similar to what you see on most of the bikes now, the sort of the square style, different frame. The different air intake probably points to a different engine, which we've been saying before. They've been trying to deal with these grip issues, and they haven't got on top of it. That tells a lot of people that the engine needs some work. And of course, they've been unable to do that because of the technical freeze. That's coming to an end. So now they're able to change the engine, and they had at least one new engine design, we assume, for this bike. There was another bike with a slightly different air intake, which could point to a different engine design. So yeah, anyway, either way, a lot of big changes. As Marquez says, it was big in both ways, in that, it was, the improvements were big, but some of the disadvantages were also big. So now they've got to kind of piece everything together or narrow things down, haven't they, for this next test at Jerez at the end of November, because that's when really you want things in place, and then the factories can go away over the winter and come out for the preseason testing. There's only 2 preseason tests, and then you're going racing. So it's an important moment to get things right. But clearly we could see that Honda have been working very hard, and they were very cagey, very, very cagey about, what had been changed and everything else. The press releases had no pictures from Honda of any of these all-black prototype bikes, which is always an example. And the quotes were very, the official quotes, in the press releases were very kind of vanilla, shall we say. No commitment about anything, just that we tried some new things for next year. They were a bit more, the riders, when they were being interviewed and things, they were a bit more, they gave a bit more away, as I say, and Marquez did say, yeah, big changes, both directions. Pole got to try it on the second day, so he stuck with his usual bike on the first day, and then he got to try the prototype on the second day. And a similar thing, he said, big changes, and we need to see where we go with this. But that was the main, I guess, the highlight of the test, if you're looking for a big development. Yamaha also had a prototype bike, although the riders referred to it more as the chassis for next year. And it did turn out that it does seem to have had a new engine as well, but the engine was very minimal, the changes to it. And Quartararo did kind of admit, I hope there's a little bit more power found for when I try it next time. So as we know, that's where the Yamaha is really struggling, is the top speed. Suzuki, they brought a new engine and a new frame, and but they split it into 2 tests, if you like. They didn't test it as one bike. So they did more work on the 22 engine. It does seem to have a bit more power. Sounds quite encouraging. But the frame was more interesting because it sounds like they could use it for the remaining rounds of this year. So it must be able to fit around the engine that they currently have. So we could see that this weekend at COTA. Mia said it improved the braking. So more stability, but the trouble was, of course, you get more stability, the bike's harder to turn. So they were trying to work on getting back the agile nature of the bike, plus these, it seems, gains in keeping the gains in braking. And the other manufacturers, Ducati, Aprilia, really just aerodynamics seemed to be all they were testing. We don't know what was going on under the skin, shall we say, but that was the obvious things from the outside. KTM had Danny Pedrosa. He's been working on this different bike for most of the year. It seems Oliveira tried an all-black prototype bike again. We don't know exactly what was different on it, so we need to wait for that. But basically, this was the last chance before the final test of the year, which is when really all of the factories will aim to give their riders what they hope will be pretty much the 2022 bike. That was really the purpose of this test.
The lead-in time for engineering, this type of engineering, is so long that you've got to make a decision really before we get to next year, before we get to the early test. They just can't just can't dream up something. But I think the significance here is that the rules haven't changed. The rules are the same for the way that you manufacture the motor. You know, the actual parameters that they've got to work within are still the same. The rule book is exactly the same. So they've got the same rules. They've just got to try and work out how to make that work within those rules. And therein lies the big problem, I think. You know, despite the fact we've been on a big technical freeze, and there will be lots of innovations and stuff that they would have thought of in that time, during the technical freeze, they virtually have. I'd be an advocate of extending testing, bearing in mind that they've been in a technical freeze, so therefore the slow lead up hasn't been there. I think they're creating a rod for their own back when it comes to what's going to happen at the beginning of next year. I'm looking forward to seeing what the final incarnations of these things are and where the differences will come. But they won't be that big because they can't, because the rules are the same. And testing wise, you know, you come out with something radical within the rules and it don't work, you're stuck with it from Qatar onwards if you're a factory team. So a real difficult one for the factories.
Just as you were saying, Rossi's final test as well. So a small sort of landmark there, you know, I think 22 years after his first test, should we say. I did ask him, you know, he did say he's never really been that much of a fan of testing. You know, racing is what he's about. But I said, do any stand out? And of course, they tended to be the tests where he got on a new bike, you know, the first time on the Honda 500 at Jerez in 99. And then the first MotoGP ride he had is after the 8 hours with Colin Edwards, they jumped on what is now the modern breed of Premier Class bike. And then the Yamaha was the other big test that he had at Sepang 2004. So, but yes, so that's another sort of milestone for Rossi reached, and 4 more races to go in his full-time career.
Yeah, emotional.
Well, it will be. I'll tell you what, it will be. I've got another Misano coming up later. That'll be the final one, and that place is going to be on fire, quite literally, I think, during the weekend with Rossi's last ever race. Interesting, again, I keep mentioning BSB because for those of you that aren't aware, I got parachuted in at the weekend to help out with Eurosport's coverage because Jack Bernicle was sick. I hope you're getting well, Jack, by the way. But the big buzz was the amount of interest there is from World Championship riders in BSB as they drop through the ranks. And the biggest one for me was the fact we were expecting to see Frankie Carcetti, who is Joan Mir's crew chief and manager of Jake Dixon. So I think we can almost, from what I understand, expect Jake Dixon to be back in BSB next year, which will obviously say to us that Darren Binder is likely to get that Petronas berth direct up from Moto 3 into MotoGP. Having just said what I've said, it could be complete.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting around the British Superbike paddock, some of the rumours that were going on around there, who was coming. But I think the Jake Dixon one is quite credible. He came from British Superbikes. He was a British Superbike winner. That's what gave him his chance in Grand Prix, and it's looking more tenuous. The ex-Petronas team for 2022, it looks like Binder is well placed to get himself that ride, and therefore Jakey is left with virtually nowhere to go. And the fact that I didn't see Frankie Carcetti, it was only a rumour that he was en route to Alton Park at the weekend. Apparently he got held up, I was told, somewhere, traffic, airplanes, whatever it might have been.
Everyone at the petrol stations.
Don't go there.
No, I won't. Look, I was going to dedicate a whole piece to you being back on.
No, don't do that.
But how was it? How was it though? Back behind the mic. You remember how to do it?
I think so. It's called.
For those who are the audio version of that, you'll have to watch the video version to see what Keith might.
I enjoyed it. I mean, it was like Wednesday. I got the call. Jack's had a chest infection for a while. He was supposed to do the bowl door. He couldn't do the bowl door. He wanted to do it. He's an old soldier, Jack Bernicle, so he's been doing this, and this is the first one I think he's missed in all those years of doing British Superbike. So they rang me because effectively I'm cruising around with my family and children at the moment, and I'm working on other things, but not on broadcast stuff. So, and it was really interesting because I've not worked with Eurosport for a long time, and what a great little team. I mean, I have to say the BT team through North One is a great team, but Eurosport is a level of social life probably better, if you like. I mean, they were really, really easygoing, welcomed me in there with open arms, and I enjoyed the weekend. Alton Park in the sunshine is just a fantastic place to be anyway. And I had intended, I didn't tell them this, I had intended on being there on Friday, because I always go to Friday BSB if I've got a Friday where I'm not doing too much, because that's the best day for me. There's not a lot of traffic. You can wander around and see people because it's not too intense just yet. And so it's a really social kind of day. And I went to round one with Julian. Met Julian up there for a pint and a pie, and Alton, Cadwell Park, and Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuits are my favourite. Brands is the top for me. Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit they don't come any better. But then Alton is sort of a wider Cadwell, in as much as you've got a little bit more area. I remember, it was amazing actually. I was in commentary at one point, shouting and screaming and jumping up and down like I do, and I just happened to catch out my corner of my eye this guy sat behind me. It was Jonathan Palmer. He'd come in as well to watch the bikes. No one even knew he was at the track. I mean, Stuart Higgs, who obviously works with Jonathan, hadn't even said anything that JP was coming in. And Palmer he's a proper car bloke, as you know, Harry. He's a proper car bloke, ex-Formula One. But when he was in Formula One, I was in 500 Grand Prix, and we had we shared a sponsor, STC Builders, and so we've known each other for quite a long time. But JP is the epitome of OCD. That man is he spots everything. And the reason I'm saying this is because his tracks, since his consortium have owned them, are manicured in comparison to how they were. It was a bit wild before, which some people might like, daisies and all the rest of it out on the grass, but now it's all cut lovely. And Alton Park, I went round the track with Higgsy in one of the pace cars, and they've done a real job of taking the barriers right back to where they can now. I mean, there's not a lot of room on British racetracks to move barriers back, because there's all boundaries and trees and stuff that they can't dig up. That's always in the way, but they've done a really good job. I mean, and I have to say, Stuart Higgs actually managed this M4 around there quite well. And I remember thinking, crikey, if this thing lets go, that little gravel trap isn't going to stop it. Despite the fact it had been taken back quite a few more yards, it's still tight. And I think that's the difference between American tracks, British tracks, and the speeds of the bikes we've got now. British Superbikes. While I sat there with Jamie Whittam, my era, probably the 500cc's was chucking out about 130 brake horsepower. Now, bearing in mind that was through 4-inch wheels with tyres that were made of concrete and a power band of about 2,500 RPM. Jamie Whittam's bikes would have been about 160. They're all over 200 now. And on a track like Alton Park, when you stand at the side of the track, you have to stand back a bit, because they are so fast. They are, and they've got so much grip. And you think, crikey, if this thing lets go, it is going into space. Which brings us back again to that perennial problem that all series have. Has it got too quick? You watch the 600s, the super sports class, perfect bike for that racetrack. Really, really good. But there's something about them animals. The bigger the bike, the faster the bike. It's that gladiatorial, danger involved in it. I mean, honestly, it feels like you're going to bite your hand if you put your hand over the fence. It is really one of those situations. It's like a zoo without the fence. Bloody fast. Great, though. Really, really good.
Well,
I enjoyed my weekend. Thank you very much,
it was
Harry.
excellent to hear you, and that you even had me watching as well. Do you like the fact they have an camera in the commentary box? That kind of scares me a little bit. That they've got a camera in there.
Yeah, well, it does me, because then I get all the nose jokes and all the rest of it. But it's no different from here.
I'll tell you who's a very good commentator. Jolyon Palmer. He's pretty decent on the old 5 Live stuff. Actually, he's sort of really done well there. I think
commentary really, once you've developed a style for it, particularly if you've been a reasonable racer in that class or that area as well, it gives you kinds of insights that respect. Journalists pick up on what's being said and what's being done, and usually get it fairly accurately. But drivers, riders spot it as it's happening quickly. They're across whatever the situation is. I mean, I love working with other riders. I mean, like Jamie Whittam's great fun. James Hayden, who I worked with at the weekend as well. James Hayden, I've known him since he was 15, riding for Ron Haslam in a British team over here. years and years and years ago, and he's now a very successful man away from the tracks. You know, he really does commentary just because he's a bike man and he loves being there. So it's kind of, you know, commentary-wise, when you work with these guys that spot stuff before it happens, it's exciting to be alongside people like that as well, people that share that kind of passion. I can't help myself. I really can't. I mean, it is bloody ridiculous. And I mean, it hasn't waned with age either. I thought maybe the edge would go off of it a little bit, but it hasn't at all. I mean,
still got it.
Well, I still want it. I think that's the thing.
Well, hopefully it won't be too long till you're back behind the mic again. Just coming back to, I know sort of divert a little bit off. We were talking about Darren Binder and possibly his promotion. Of course, knowing our luck, by the time this goes out, that would have all been announced in the complete opposite direction. But I did want to just chat also, because Keith, you'll know the experience, I imagine. You know, the first time for Remy Gardner and Ralph Fernandez on the big bikes, that must have been a pretty big moment for them as well at the Misano test.
Raoul I can't speak for, but I can speak for Remy because I've spoken to his dad often. His dad, obviously, me and him were raced together, travelled together and so on and so forth. He has always said that Remy is a big bike rider. He's always said when you see him out in the bush, you know, the way he drifts it and the throttle control he's got, he's a big bike rider. And I think that's been proved when we got the 765 Triumph. You know, as soon as we got on something with a bit of horsepower, something that suddenly gets out of order, something that's got a bit of mid-range like the 765s have, Remy came into his own. Once he was fit and not injured. And I think we're going to see that next step from him. I think he is capable of that next step on a MotoGP bike. Now, Raul Fernandez is, you know, great rider as well. I don't know about the step he will make and how easy he will find it. But I believe Remy will. I think he's going to be a good MotoGP rider.
Both of them were quite fast as well, weren't they? I mean, you know, Fernandez 2.4 seconds off. I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? And Remy pretty close, 3 seconds as well. So you could see them sort of moving up, getting closer from their first laps as they moved up, you know, chipping away at the lap times. And I think both of them absolutely loved, as you can imagine, the power of the bikes. You know, they were all smiles when they got off it.
I think they had a problem in that, you know, particularly for both of those guys, really, at the end of the day, if they'd have overstepped the mark in that test, you know, they've got a world championship they're both fighting for. You know, end up with a broken leg in a test while you're trying out a motorbike. So the test is great from their own point of view. They had a feel and an idea of what they've got to come, but I don't suppose either of them was anywhere near like their potential truly on a MotoGP bike just yet.
Well, it will be exciting to watch the progress, won't it? Now, before we have a proper look forward to this weekend, we've got time for a couple of quick questions that have come in. Off the back of, I think, what we were talking about last week as well. And actually, this is on World Supersport from Al904cc. Who has said, speaking of Scott Smart, who do the panel feel, or what do the panel feel, I should say, about the 2022 regulations for World Supersport with the introduction of the V2 Panigale and MV800 Triumph 765 alongside the 600cc Yamahas? Personally, I'm all for it, as the series desperately needs a refresh, as only Yamaha still make a 600cc race bike available.